¿verdad? Si están hablando muy rápido y no les estoy diciendo bien, voy a hacer esto.
There's an open Wi-Fi signal nearby.
Si no entendí algo, quiero que lo repita.
It's only
Voy a
for
hacer esto. For y'all, like, if I didn't understand something or like I need to repeat it, I'm going to do it.
What's up, guys?
Es difícil traducir con una, si muchos están hablando al mismo tiempo.
What up,
So,
guys?
si me van a hacer esto, es por favor, para una persona a la vez hablar o hacer preguntas. Right? It's hard to cancel when there's like a lot of people talking, so I'll do this, like one night.
What's up, guys? For you guys just joining, we're in a class right now that are teaching citizens how to record the police. So we're gonna stream this live for you guys.
And then, yeah, and if I can't hear you, translate,
closer.
I'm going to do this.
What's up, guys?
Right, speak up. So, si no los escucho, puedes hacerles así para que hablen un poco más despacio.
What's left?
So, ¿esto qué es? What is this? Slow down, más despacio. Más alto. Repítelo. Alright, cool. So I'm gonna be back here. Si necesitan traducción, vengan acá y voy a estar
This is
traduciendo.
We're gonna set some norms. First, I'm gonna let Minnie get set up, and then we're gonna set some norms. So we're all in this space together. Most of us don't know each other, so we wanna make sure that we're all here for the same reasons, and we're all here under the same intentions.
Can you guys hear this pretty good?
We good? Alright. So these are just some base norms that we have here at the organization. Have the experience you need,
It's weird.
right? We're all here to learn together. And the only person that's an actual expert is Jamar. We all have our own experience. This is a space that's safe to push back in, so voice your tensions and contradictions. We're all teachers in our own right, and we are, in this moment, students. And everybody's presence here is valuable, very valuable. And give space, take space. So this is, if you have had a lot of time speaking, maybe step, or if your personality is really strong like mine, step back and let somebody else have an opportunity to speak. Is there anything else that we want to talk about? We talked about one diva, one mic, so just to make sure that we're all talking one at a time. Anybody want to add anything? Norms? No, just be with here with respect, right? And we have a couple of hashtags, which you all in the material should have access to. Phoenix Truth, Film Phoenix Cops. And I'm done speaking, and Jamar is gonna do the rest of it.
All right, thanks for having me.
Welcome, Jamar.
Yeah. Thank you, Sarge. That's cool.
All right, okay. Okay.
Let me have this.
These papers. And this.
All right, thanks for having me. I'm a member of the Central Arizona chapter of the National Lawyers Guild. We are a local organization who promotes and develops policy that focuses on prioritizing human rights over property interests. We do have a national organization, and we have 2 chapters in Arizona. So I just want to thank everyone for coming to listen and welcoming me into this space.
We also have a microphone.
You think I need it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you all hear in the back? Oh, okay.
Okay, cool. If anyone can't hear me, just let me know. I'll get the microphone. And if anyone ever has any questions, feel free to raise your hand and I can answer them. As part of my membership in the National Lawyers Guild at Central Arizona chapter, I often watch police on my own and one of my other jobs is being a criminal defense attorney. So in that job, I've seen hundreds of police reports. I've interviewed hundreds of police officers, and I have a sense of what they think of members of the community. I have a sense of how they interact with members of the community. So part of this presentation is based on a combination of that knowledge and a combination of my own personal knowledge interacting with police on the street. All right, why is it important to film police? So one of the things I didn't know before becoming a defense attorney is that police do have restrictions in making arrests. They're not allowed to use too much force when arresting someone, and they are supposed to use no greater force than necessary to arrest someone. You can understand by those restrictions why it could be important to film a police officer when they're making an arrest. But we're not only talking about that. We're also talking about filming police in their interactions with citizens also, because it's important to film police in their day-to-day interactions with citizens, because you never know when those can turn violent, but also in their arrests of people in the community, because those are situations that are more prone to be violent, especially with the Phoenix Police Force. You can save a life. Sometimes police are less likely to use force if they know someone else is watching, or if they know other witnesses are around. So it's very beneficial to film police because it's a check on them. And in this jurisdiction, in the city of Phoenix, unfortunately for us, we don't have other entities who are willing and able to be that check on police. So we have to take it upon ourselves. I remember a situation where I was watching a police officer interact with a citizen, for example, of how important this can be. And you can put it all over. And it was late at night, and this officer was interacting with the citizen who was on the street. And the citizen, or the community member, looked to be a little disoriented and not know where they were. As they were walking down the street, this police officer pulled up. I stopped to watch, and the police got out of their car and approached this person on the street. When they approached this person on the street, they started asking this person questions. What are you doing? Do you need help? And the person wasn't responding, which is perfectly okay. If someone's just out in the street, it's perfectly okay not to talk to police if you don't want to. So that police officer tried to reach for that person's arm, and that person pulled away, and they pulled away kind of violently. So that police officer responded again, hey, do you need help? What can I do for you? And that person kind of pulled away in a way where they swung their arm at that police officer, right? At that moment, that police officer looked up and looked around to see if anyone was nearby or watching. And that's when they saw me there watching. Now, I can't predict the future. I don't know what was going to happen between that officer and that person on the street. But I do know that before that officer did anything else, they looked around to see who was watching, and I was there watching. So that's an example of how you can prevent police violence by just being there. Obviously, it's important to record too, so you can have objective evidence also if things do turn violent for no reason. In that scenario, that police officer had some leeway in how they could interpret that interaction, which could have justified violence. But if you have that on video, that is an objective counter to whatever that police officer could do. We'll get into that later. Sure.
What's the safe distance for filming, recording without them saying, hey, you're interfering with my police?
That's a great question. We're going to get into that as well, okay? There are some general rules that people should abide by while recording police, and we're going to get into all that. We're also going to get into how police can interpret your behavior to try and, I guess, threaten or intimidate you to stop recording. All right, so even with body cameras, filming police can save a life. And it's important because body cams don't film police, they film us. They film members of the community. That's not the perspective we're looking for, right? We are trying to film how police interact with people on the street, not what people on the street are doing. We have enough of that already. Body cameras function or they fall off. Police can control that video also. So police can record body cam video, not release it to the public. They can censor or edit it based on the reasons they feel necessary. So it's important for us to have that evidence ourselves and in our own control in case we need to use it as community members. Also, it can save someone from a felony charge. So that interaction that I described between that person on the street and that officer, that person probably didn't mean to swing at that officer with any intent to harm that officer. They just swung their arms away from that officer. However, if that officer wanted to, they could have interpreted that as an assault on an officer, and they could have handcuffed that person, charged them, and that person would be facing a felony now. Well, if we have independent video, we can offer that video to help that person and could save that person from having a felony or being jailed as a result of that interaction with the police. All right, why else is it important? Well, simply put, cops lie. You can put all of them. Cops are legally allowed to lie to get information. The courts have allowed it. You'll see this in most commonly, well, not most commonly, you see it in all kinds of ways. But one example of this is when someone's being interrogated and the police say, listen, I already know all the information. I know you were there. You're the one who did it. So just tell me the truth, right? The officer probably doesn't know all that information. They're just saying that to get you to admit to something or to get you to say things. And the courts have said that cops can lie in scenarios to help them pursue their investigation of a crime. Cops often lie to justify their behavior. Now, these are specific instances where it's important to film police, right? And these come up all the time. The difference between, do I have a slide or a picture? Okay. So the difference between flinching and a fighting stance, right? Now, let's say an officer has a body camera on and that body camera is filming someone.
Jonathan wants to hear.
Jonathan, why don't you come up here, all right? All right, Jonathan, let's pretend you don't know me, right? And let's say I come up to you like this. What do you see? You see the step back Jonathan took? He only moved 1 foot, right? I've literally seen that be interpreted as someone taking a fighting stance. So this is an example of why it's important to get a film of both me and Jonathan, because all my officer body camera is going to show is Jonathan taking this fighting stance against me. It's not going to show what I'm doing to provoke this fighting stance, right? So if I'm an officer, I could say, Jonathan took a fighting stance. I had to take him down because I felt threatened for my safety. He committed aggravated assault on a police officer. Now he's going to jail, right? But if we have video of that interaction, that's just a flinch, right? That flinch doesn't happen if we don't have video and an honest cop. Thanks, Jonathan. Woo, Jonathan. Another way that cops interpret instances between community members to justify their force. In Arizona, let's say an officer is trying to arrest you or gets in a scuffle with you, and you brush up against their firearm. Well, that could be interpreted in Arizona as a class 3 felony, right? Now, all you did was accidentally brush up against the firearm. But what that officer is going to say is you try to take their firearm. And they're going to interpret that as a threat, and they're potentially going to use force against you, arrest you, and charge you with a crime. So these are the differences in how cops lie or favorably interpret interaction with community members to justify their behavior. You can see this in a recent example with the Ames family. Cops also make omissions. It's important to film police behavior so we can capture those omissions in their behavior, right? And with the Ames family recently, we have an example where one of the officers reported that he drew his handgun to contact ready and continued to give loud commands. Well, we know from that specific video that what also happened is he said, I'm gonna put a fucking cap in your fucking head, you're gonna fucking get shot, right? This is a glaring omission in his report writing that we would have never known unless we filmed that police officer in that interaction. Other omissions happen in the same way, right? I spread his legs. versus violently sweeping someone's legs from under them. We would have never known that unless we had independent video. So officers often make omissions that are important pieces of information that could be used later to show that they are not being truthful, or could be used later to help that individual who's now facing criminal charges. All right, next slide. All right. Right to film. It's in the Constitution, simply put, right? You have a right to film public officers doing their job in public. Not only do you have a right to film this, courts recommend that it's a good idea to film police doing their job in public, right? And this is what the law says. This is protected freedom of speech, the origin of which comes from your First Amendment right. So usually when people think of their First Amendment rights, they think, oh, freedom of press, right? First Amendment rights. Now, like I said before, we're trying to get public officials on camera, right? Doing their job and treating our community members the way they're treating our community members, not our community members. So when we're exercising our First Amendment rights, we want to film everyone involved in a scenario, right? Because we're not there to be extra police. We're not there to help police gather information. I'm going to do just a brief demonstration about what I mean by this, and then we're going to do like a pop quiz. If I can get Heather Hamill up here. Oh, okay. That's going to have you. That's one. Oh, sure. Why not? Come on up if you want to. Why not? Why not? Do you want? That's a tough question. Do you want to be the police or the victim? Okay, all right. Then don't let me traumatize you too much. Okay. Well, actually, I need another volunteer. You got someone? Heather, you want to be the police officer?
No.
All right. Well, let me tell you something. All right, I'm gonna be the cop, something I never imagined I'd ever be in my entire life. And we have our victim here, okay? You ready? All right. Ma'am, stop please. Ma'am, what are you doing here? Ma'am, please stop. Stop, ma'am. Come talk to me. All right, that was scenario one. Everyone see where Heather was filming? All right, we'll do scenario two. You did great. Ma'am, come here. Please stop. Ma'am, please stop. Come here, please. You need to talk to me. All right, great. All right, great job for one. All right, if anyone, you can sit down. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. All right, was anyone watching the different angles from Heather? All right, what was wrong with the first way she was doing it? Right, she was only filming the victim. She was too close. She was only filming Juana, right? That doesn't do us much benefit, right? Because the police officers are already going to describe what Juana is doing. They may describe it wrong, but our filming Juana doesn't really give us a benefit, right? In the second version, Heather was filming both of us. And that's what we want to do. We want to capture the police and the people that they're interacting with, because if we just capture the people they're interacting with, we're not doing ourselves any favor, and we're not monitoring these public officers as they do their job in public. Okay? Go ahead.
Tú puedes grabar como tú mismo cuando te detiene la policía. ¿Puedes tú sacar el teléfono o no?
You yourself, can you film like as the victim yourself?
The police, yes.
Yes, you can film the police yourself as the victim, right? But it gets tricky, so you have to use your best judgment, right? You can film the police all you want, but you may about to be getting arrested, okay? So it's important to, it's important to use your judgment. Number one, because when you get arrested, police are able to do an inventory search of your person and to take your property to make sure it's in their custody for safekeeping, right? They may do stuff to your phone that you don't want them to do. They're not allowed to, but they might, okay? And number two, given the Phoenix police, it's very dangerous to reach in your pockets when you're being confronted by police. So if you are able to judge how a policeman is interacting with you, and if you think you might risk your own safety by pulling out your phone, you shouldn't do it because you might get shot. Good question. Go ahead.
What about if you, before they get to your car, you do like a Facebook or Instagram live?
Yeah, that's a great idea. So if you're anticipating being encountered by police, you yourself put yourself on live or any way you can so that you can make sure that's recorded. Not only is it important to film the police, but also recordings help too. So because police often omit things that they say to you, and they often omit things you tell them, right? So getting all that on even just an audio recording is important as well. Was there a question back there?
Yeah, it says public officials is public, but what's your private property? How do I find that law?
That's a good question. The problem with private property is you can be trespassed from private property. So the First Amendment has limits, right? Like take, for example, a courtroom. That's open to the public, but there are rules in place where you can't just walk into a courtroom and start filming everyone in the courtroom, right? There are also rules in place where you have to do filming in a lawful manner, right? Potentially trespassing on someone else's property is not filming in a lawful manner. But we'll get into more information about that.
Excuse me.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. All right, next slide. Cool. So, sorry.
I have to look at it up too.
Oh, you do? All right, let's play.
All right. Okay.
So there are limits and obstacles to filming the police, right? That's fine.
I queued up. I meant it's on my desktop, ready to play.
You have to do it in a lawful manner, and you can't be interfering with some police activity in most scenarios. But the police are going to try and intimidate you regardless. Well, I guess I shouldn't make a generalization about that. Police might try to intimidate you regardless of what you're doing, okay? And here's an example. Before I play this example, I am standing on public property on a sidewalk. I have a right to be there. No one's asked me to leave. I'm not yelling too much, and all I have is my phone out. And I video recorded an arrest that a gentleman on the street asked me to video record. So that's all I'm doing. Before this, multiple officers came and approached me, asked me what I was doing. I basically said, listen, I'm just here for this gentleman. I don't really want to talk to you. And this is what happened after they made the arrest.
Oh, turn the sound up over there. Okay, now turn it.
Whoever's connected here,
You
disconnect.
can disconnect from the button that says disconnect, and then currency can disconnect.
Oh, it was me. Sorry, guys. All right, now let's try this.
Disconnect from you.
Wait, I got it. Technical difficulties. So
Yes.
no, the second blue light. Yeah, all right.
Y'all don't need to treat him like that. Sergeant Lewis, nice to meet you. Play it again. Y'all don't need to treat him like that. Sergeant Lewis, nice to meet you. Did anyone catch what he said at the end of that video? This man has no right to come take my cell phone. I didn't do anything wrong. I'm not being charged with a crime. He went on to say that the reason he needed my cell phone was because it was evidence. I'm not sure what evidence he was talking about, because the only thing I recorded was 5 officers arresting 1 man, and they put him in the back of that SUV. Now, when he asked the sergeant about me, the sergeant said, leave him alone, right? Police officers don't have a right to just take your cell phone and rummage through it. They need a warrant to take your cell phone, and they need legal justification to seize you or to seize any of your property on the street like that. So what he's really doing is trying to intimidate me, right? Or maybe get me to consent to give him my cell phone. I could consent and give him my cell phone, and whatever he does in that video, I don't know. But I would suggest that it's not a good idea to consent to give your cell phone if you want your video to not be deleted, if you want to keep your video. So they'll do things like this to prevent you from recording them. Other things that they'll do, they'll surround you and use certain language, right? What are you doing here? Why do you need to be here, right? They'll ask you questions like that. Sometimes it's okay for them to ask you questions, and sometimes it's not. It depends on the way that they're asking you questions, right? Now, if you're there, and I'm gonna use this scenario. If I was there and I was all up in their group, right? Then they probably have a stronger reason to arrest me, and eventually they would take my things, right? But I'm not all up in their business. I'm not doing any kind of obstruction or interference with their official duties as police officers, right? Let's give an example of what that might look like. I need a couple of volunteers.
Yeah, don't do it, I'll do it for you.
All right. All right. I need one more volunteer. All right, come on up. I'm going to be the filmer, and I need one of you 3 to be a police officer. Well, 2 of you to be a police officer, okay, and one of you to be a victim. All right. One of you is going to be the arresting officer, and one of you is going to be sort of giving the arresting officer backup. Which one do you want to be? I'll be backup. You were with them pretending to be? Okay. All right. Do your arresting duties.
You're under arrest.
For what?
Whatever.
Whoa, officer, whoa. Why are you arresting this woman? Back up. Yeah.
You're under arrest.
All right, thanks. You can sit down. That's all. It almost hurt you to say those words. All right, so a couple things that I did wrong. This is like overzealously filming police. Please don't do this for your own safety and for the safety of the person being victimized by police. Number one, they're not going to get any of the video because now you subjected your video to being in police custody. Who knows what could happen to it after that? And number two, now you just put yourself in a situation where you're now being a victim of potential police violence, okay? One thing that I did in that scenario is I went up too quick and I put my hand on that officer, right? I'm interfering with that arrest, and they're probably going to detain me at least to get me away from this situation. But number two, in Arizona, I just committed aggravated assault against an officer by touching him. So he can interpret my touch of him as touching him with a certain intent, where now I'm charged with aggravated assault on an officer, and now I'm looking at a felony potentially. Okay? It's that easy. Any questions so far? All right. Oh, go ahead.
So if you're filming and it looks like someone is at risk for violence from police, should you like say that you're filming? Is it helpful to say like I'm filming this to try try to see if that prevent that?
Yes, I would say yes, but use your best judgment, okay? Police officers are they got a lot of adrenaline going in these scenarios. They have guns, potentially people around them may have weapons, so it could be a very dangerous scenario. But I would say yes, but that's gonna be a case-by-case scenario, right? I can tell you that I've been in a scenario where there were multiple police officers arresting an individual who appeared to be intoxicated, right? And he kept falling to the ground. And they kept grabbing him so hard that he was wincing because they were applying so much force to him. And the people I was with who were recording, we kept saying, just let him be. You don't have to grab him like that. You're gonna take him eventually, right? And for some reason that seemed to calm these police officers down, and they let this man just sit until he kind of got his wits about him and they were able to put him in a police car, right? So sometimes that can help. But I'm gonna talk about this later. As a precaution, sometimes you might not want to identify yourself, right? Like if you're around police and you don't want to be traumatized, or you know of some reason they might arrest you, or you have things on your person that you don't want police knowing about, then it's not a good idea to insert yourself in that way if you are now risking your own jeopardy by being arrested or being charged with a criminal offense. Okay. All right, so I think a gentleman mentioned this earlier. When we say that you can exercise your First Amendment right lawfully, these are some of the things that we are talking about, right? These are also some of the ways that police are going to threaten you so that you stop filming them, okay? Now, there's a scenario where a friend of mine was filming a police officer interacting with an older black male, but they were in the, I guess, courtyard of a private business. And the private business had been closed. It was late at night and the private business was closed. And my friend walked up to this interaction and started listening, but he wasn't filming yet. And then he started filming. And the police didn't want him filming for whatever reason, and so they asked him to leave. He didn't leave. Then they said that the property was closed, so he needed to leave because he was going to be trespassed from the property, okay? So then he started leaving because he didn't want to get charged with trespass or arrested for trespassing. That's an example of what police might do to get you to stop filming if you're in certain areas, or if they can think of any crime that you might be committing, they're going to threaten you with committing that crime so that they can get you to either move away or stop filming. Some of those crimes in Arizona are, like I said, trespass, also disorderly conduct. And remember what I said in the beginning, police are going to interpret what's going on to justify their behavior or use of force,
59.
or to charge you with a criminal act,
In
whether
Indian
it's
school.
true or not. So you have disorderly conduct, you have obstructing a highway or other public thoroughfare, and like I said earlier, you have obstruction generally. And keep in mind, in Arizona, you can be arrested for any misdemeanor or felony. So even though disorderly conduct and trespass in most scenarios are misdemeanors, police can still arrest you for that. Any questions? Go ahead.
Suppose it's a situation whereas they don't arrest you, but they put handcuffs on you and put you in a police car and tell you you're not under arrest, you're being detained until they leave.
Sure. So some of the,
Can you repeat the question so that people live?
sure. So the gentleman's question was, suppose that you don't get arrested, you just get detained by a police officer confronting you, putting handcuffs on you, and putting you in the police car for a certain amount of time, right? I'll get into how that works in a little bit, but police cannot do that unless they have some justification for that act, right? And you're protected from that by the Fourth Amendment. So police can't just detain you for no reason, right? But I'll get into a little bit more, and if I don't answer your question, feel free to answer.
I'm gonna answer. Suppose they say, but if you don't leave, then we'll charge you with obstruction and investigation. So we're going to detain you, and they put handcuffs on you and put you in a police car.
Right. So police also aren't allowed to, I guess, the best way to put it, police aren't allowed to retaliate against you for exercising your First Amendment rights, okay? That's also why it's important to get that interaction on camera, okay? But police are probably gonna say something like that. And it's hard to win that scenario in this jurisdiction. Because if a police officer says that you did disorderly conduct or trespass, or even obstructing a highway or public thoroughfare, it's hard to combat what the police officers are saying in this jurisdiction, unfortunately. We have a weak oversight mechanism in our police force and in our city, and we don't have prosecutors who are willing to believe our word over police's most of the time.
The reason I asked that question is because that's what happened. They did that to me, and they didn't put me in a police car, they put me in a dog kennel.
Wow. I'm sorry to hear that. We can talk more about that after the presentation if you want. All right, so once you know, I don't know if they said this to you, but when you know things are getting serious is when you start hearing these words. Go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry. Detention threats. You're not free to leave, you're being detained, now you're under arrest. So that's how you know a police officer is getting serious, right? Those are phrases that are a manifestation of their official exercise of their force against you, right? They're detaining you, and they have to have legal justification for that. So they're basically putting themselves out there as if they have that legal justification. But cops can sometimes get tricky with this, right? Like they'll say, hey, I want to talk to you. But they'll say it in a forceful way, right? And you think, oh, this is a police order. And then they'll say, no, I encountered this individual on the street and we were just voluntarily engaging with each other, right? That's how they manipulate some of their, I guess, ways of interacting with you. All right, let's do another demonstration. Who wants to volunteer this time? Is it because you got to be a cop?
Oh,
I'll volunteer.
Yes, yellow, you stood up. We want to give everybody a chance to get in there and role play. You just want to?
No, actually, I'm going to switch you out with Heather because I need a
Okay.
specific volunteer.
Okay.
There it is.
You're going to be the victim, and you're going to be the police officer.
Oh, she's tucking her shirt in, it means business.
All right.
Okay.
So,
You are under arrest.
Officer Hamill is making an arrest.
You are under arrest.
Excuse me, sir, you're trespassing? You're trespassing? Can you please leave
I have a
police
right to
property?
film.
You are trespassing? Sir, you are trespassing.
All right.
I could probably.
Arrest two people at the same time? All right, thank you to our volunteers.
Thank you.
All right, this is another scenario where we're not doing either of us any good, right? I just exposed myself to a potential trespass charge because let's pretend that was some kind of private property. And now any video I have is potentially now in the government's hands and may not be ever seen again. So I didn't help that person and I got myself arrested. Now, it's not usually, in my experience, police will, if you listen to what they're saying and you show them that you're being somewhat compliant, they won't, I guess, escalate the situation, right? So I've been in scenarios where if the police tells me to back up, I'll take a couple steps back, still keep recording. Take a couple steps back, still keep recording. Take a couple steps back, still keep recording. Because they're trying to, it benefits them if you stop recording usually. All right, any questions so far? All right. So, given that police are going to say some of these words to you, or they're gonna threaten you, or try to detain you or arrest you, it's important that you know maybe what buzz phrases that trigger them telling you the truth, or what buzz phrases you can say to get the real answers from them. So, like I said earlier, the Fourth Amendment right, you have a Fourth Amendment right to be free from unreasonable searches and seizures. Oh, thank you. So you can't be arrested or detained without legal justification, okay? That either means reasonable suspicion, or in some scenarios it means probable cause. Probable cause to make an arrest, execute a search warrant, charge you with a crime, reasonable suspicion to detain you for some investigative purpose, okay? So what may help you in that scenario, and there's no golden rule here because
59th in Indian School.
because of the scenario that we have and the culture we're dealing with in Phoenix police. But saying things like, am I free to leave? Why am I being stopped? Is this consensual because I don't consent? Have I done anything wrong? Things like this are hopefully going to get police officers to tell you what their legal justification is for stopping you. They may or may not do this though, but it's a good thing to say in the event that they do answer you truthfully, okay? For instance, if a police officer is doing their job legally and you ask them, am I being detained or am I free to leave? They're gonna say either no, you're not being detained, and yes, of course you're free to leave. And at that moment, you're free to leave. And if a police is abiding by your Fourth Amendment rights, they're not able to detain you any longer. Some police won't do that though. Some police will say, no, you're not free to leave, and then later characterize that interaction as some sort of voluntary interaction.
Sorry guys, translator.
Any questions now? Okay, cool. All right, let's go to some pointers. Oh, let's go back real quick. It's important to use your best judgment here, right? Our objective is to be filming police so that we can document their behavior towards us, and we can document their behavior in general and capture the culture that they've created here on the streets, right? So if you let your emotions get sort of high and you bubble over, you know, yelling at police, don't do that to that man, you suck, you know, die pigs, any of that stuff is probably going to aggravate police, and it defeats the purpose, right? We're not there to agitate police, we're there to document their behavior so that it can be useful later. If the situation crumbles and gets too aggressive or violent, we've defeated our purpose for recording it in person. So use your best judgment in the things you say to police, and remember that you're there to record, not to start a fight with police officers.
Classic case of do what I say, not what I do.
All right, so here are some pointers for dealing with the violent police force that we have in Phoenix, okay? You might be excited to record police. So you might run excitedly towards the situation because you want to get whatever's happening on film. That could be dangerous for you with police officers. Sometimes what happens is when a police officer is interacting with an individual in the community, or they're making an arrest, they have police officers around them to make sure that they're safe in making that arrest or safe in that interaction. If you all of a sudden are running up on someone, it's a good way to get clotheslined or shoved, or for them to interpret your running up on them as some sort of threat. So you want to get to the place as fast as possible to be useful, but you don't want to do it in a way where you're going to be perceived as a threat yourself. Try not to speak unless you feel it's necessary, but there are some exceptions to that, right? Number one, a video is probably more useful if it's clean, but there are some exceptions to that. And number two, sometimes, like I said earlier, you can aggravate police officers. And number three, you might not want to be identified out there videotaping police for whatever reason. However, there are important exceptions to this, right? if you're videotaping in an area that doesn't identify itself geographically, or the way that you're videotaping doesn't identify the area geographically. Oh, sorry.
Repeat and.
Okay. I haven't even been looking at your sign, so I apologize for that. So if you're videotaping in an area that is not easily identifiable, you might want to say what corner you're on, or what are the cross streets, right? You might want to get the street signs on videotape so that it can be used later and you don't have this scenario where you're unable to find the person who was arrested or the police who are involved because you don't have identifying information. Another exception to this is asking police officers what their names are, what their badge numbers are, and potentially what precinct they're out of. The purpose of this is because if you, let's say you get a very useful video, but you can't identify any of the individuals involved, you're not going to be able to find the victim and give that video to them, and you're also not going to be able to hold those police officers accountable because you don't have the identifying information of those police officers. Some police officers will give you your name and badge number, or their name and badge number. Some police officers won't. Most police officers that I've dealt with have given me their name and badge number. Their precinct, that's sometimes a different story, but if you have their name and badge number, you can usually find their precinct. If you just get their name, it becomes difficult because there might be other people with that name in the police force. It's a very big police force. So those are some of the pieces of information that might be useful as you're video recording to say out loud. Go ahead.
On that film, the video we watched where you were recording, and you knew that Officer Stevens' name, did you ask him or did you know him from previous interactions?
Earlier in that, I guess, exchange, he had come over to me to sort of try to get me to leave, essentially, and I had asked him for it. So I knew I asked him previously.
And that time, were you on public property? Because it looked like it was being erected in some type of business area.
Yeah, that was in an apartment complex, and it was on a sidewalk in the apartment complex, in a parking lot. But no one had made a request for me to leave, so for all he knew, I had a right to leave there. The other thing that's important to get on video is sometimes you might not be able to film what the police are doing behind you as well, and that could be important, right? You might be surrounded by police, but you're focused on the victim and the police officer, their engagement, so you're not able to get the extent of the police force at the location where you're videotaping. So in that scenario, it might be a good idea to say, I'm videotaping this, I'm also surrounded by about 4 or 5 officers right now as I'm videotaping this. Or to say, like, we're not always able to pull our recorders out in a moment's notice, and sometimes the behavior that you really wanted to record had already happened before you started recording. So it's important to give like a brief recap sometimes of what happened right before you started recording. Like, Officer Jones just said this to me, and start recording Officer Jones, and he might affirm what he just said to you, or he might say, yeah, so what, or something like that. So even though you didn't get that previous incident on camera, you still got him or her agreeing that they said it. Sure.
Sometimes, like, in those situations, it's like, it's hard to remember, like, the only thing that we're learning right now. So, like, it's like sometimes you just like, oh crap, like, film, right? But then it's like, what if you forget, like, little pieces of information that are so vital to that, like, situation? Sometimes, like, you're nervous, you know what I mean? So it's like, what is a piece of advice that you give us, like, in terms of, like, let's say, you just, like, get, like, stuck, like, you're like, you know, I don't know if that makes sense.
It does make sense. So I've been in the same scenario where I have been confronted by police and I thought I was going to get beat up, to be honest with you. In that scenario, I can't document what's happening to me because I'm interacting with police. I'm trying to protect my own safety, right? But right after that, I took notes about everything that happened. So it's okay to take notes right after everything happens. Keep in mind, though, that depending how a case, I guess, unfolds, some of that stuff, people can ask for court orders for some of that stuff if they know that you have it. So it's important to keep that in mind. But
So like the individual can ask for court orders or?
it would be an attorney or usually it would be an attorney. Yeah. But a lot of times they don't know that you have that stuff, right? And if you just send over that, you're not putting, if you just send over your notes or whatever upon a request, you're not putting the rest of your information in jeopardy. And that's really what, your concern should be, right? You don't want your phone to all of a sudden be this open file cabinet for everybody to look at.
A lot of times, by the time you realize things are getting aggressive, you don't have time to take out your phone. Do you recommend just filming regular interactions where you so that things can happen?
Absolutely, that's a good point. So,
So vamos a decir que sí están yendo con la policía para alguien, pero no se ve violento. Y ya cuando se ve violento a veces pasa muy rápido, pues perdemos, ¿verdad? El momento violento. Entonces, ¿tú recomiendas que graben todas las interacciones con la policía?
so that's a good point. Now, I'm gonna emphasize what this woman just said and then we'll get to the question. I'm gonna repeat it. What was said was,
Lo que dijo es,
I forgot actually. You said
A lot of times, things get aggressive for the drop of them. It might be good just to film things when you don't suspect anything about them.
Gotcha. So a lot of times things get aggressive quick, so it's hard to film the actual incident that we're trying to film. So would you suggest filming interactions with police that don't appear to be violent or problematic? I would say yes. This is the reason why. You never know when the police are going to put hands on someone or when someone's going to need you to be there filming. So sometimes in some of my other, I guess, volunteer endeavors, what I'll do is I'll come up against on someone who's interacting with police and I'll ask them, do you want me to film this or are you okay? And that's perfectly fine. You have the right to walk up to someone and say, do you want this filmed? Are you okay? And some people say yes. The man in the video example that I have, he asked me to film. He said, are you filming this? Because he knew he was being mistreated by police. And you never know, like I said, you never know when a police officer is going to attempt to make an arrest. So it is a good form of practice to come up to someone and either ask them or just start filming until you know things are going to be okay, and then stop filming. But also use your best judgment in that scenario. Some of us might not want to be filmed in some scenarios, so it's important to use your best judgment if it appears that some individual being arrested or interacting with police would rather that not be filmed.
So my question is, like with that person that you filmed, did you follow up with that? Or like, what did that look like in terms of like police officer?
Great, that's our next slide. Question back there.
Do you have to identify yourself to the police?
So, if police have justification to arrest you or detain you, you have to give them your full legal name.
No, I mean, if say you walk up and you film, you just walk up, you're not doing anything.
Right.
Do you have to identify yourself to the police, and do you have to talk to the police?
You don't ever have to talk to the police. You do have to give them your full legal name when they're trying to arrest you, if they have justification to arrest you. But you never have to talk to the police. There's an exception for that, right? Like, let's say if you're driving, then you have to, well, I guess that may be changing, but if you're driving, they have some justification to make sure that you're driving in a lawful manner, right? You have your appropriate registration and things like that. But on the street, it's different, right? Because you're not operating a vehicle.
In reference to the driving, is that just the driver that needs to identify themselves, or do the passengers have to as well?
That's a good question. I would say just the driver, but I could talk to you about that later. There, like I said, there's some scenarios where it depends, right? But in most scenarios, if you're not doing anything you have to have a license to do, in most scenarios, you don't have to talk to the police. Was there another question? Okay.
Sí, mi pregunta es qué tan peligroso es grabar cuando el escenario está fuerte, que todos los oficiales están apuntando con armas a la persona que están arrestando, gritando groseros y diciendo a todo el mundo que se vayan, porque a mí me ha tocado ver esta escena donde se pone uno bastante nervioso porque ellos están todos apuntándole a una sola persona, se puede decir, pero 5, 6 o 10 oficiales apuntando con la pistola, con las armas, gritando y gritándole a la gente que se muevan de alrededor.
What would you say about situations where, like, I've seen that there's been like 6 to 10 cops all pointing their guns towards one person and they're telling everyone around to leave, to get out? Like, can we film in that moment?
That's a good question, and it depends. So in some scenarios, if there's like an emergency happening, police have the ability to ensure your safety and tell you to leave the area because there's danger in that particular area. It brings up a good point too, because it's probably not a good idea to run up on a scenario when there's that many guns around and potentially, you know, someone has a knife or any other kind of weapon. You don't want to be putting yourself in danger, right? But in that scenario, I would say that try to record if you want to, if you feel safe. But when police ask you to back up, you keep taking like incremental steps to back up, but still try to film police as much as possible. But that's a good question. Okay, so what to do with the video?
I guess just going back, if people had how distance wise, is there any, the distance, how close can we be?
There is no like there is no.
Oh wait, sorry, let me repeat that in Spanish.
Yeah.
Okay, you want me to be the top or the? You want me to be the top or the filmer?
So there is no magic number, but you have to be aware of what I told you before, right? Like, if you're within a certain distance of police officers, they can try to perceive you as a threat, or they're going to be nervous that you're around. So you have to be cognizant of that. But there's no like magic number where if you're 15 feet away, they can't tell you to leave or anything like that. So I'm gonna pretend that I'm filming this scenario, and this is what it's generally safe to do.
Sir, back up. Sir, back up. You're trespassing. Sir, back up. Sir, back up. Okay, what's your name? Sir, back up. Back up. Back up.
And you should be fine, but also take it with a grain of salt, right? Phoenix police get away with a lot of stuff. So there's nothing I can tell you today that's going to keep you absolutely safe, because the fact is we're not safe in this city when it comes to I guess the level of police violence that we're being subjected to.
I saw a video of a man. I saw a video of a man sitting on a curb with multiple officers pointing at him, and a lady behind him in the line of fire, trying to defuse the situation. It seems like it did get defused, but could she have gotten in trouble?
I would have, I can't say yes or no because of the facts of that.
Just to illustrate better, they were on the street, he was sitting on a curb, and she was at a gas station. So the perspective would be.
Crossfire, that's what she's saying.
The officers were pointing towards the curb, so their shots would have fired into the gas station, into the parking lot.
Right, so for someone's personal safety, that's a personal choice, right? But if you're saying, is it like a law somewhere to not be in police crossfire? I'm not aware of anything like that. So that woman can film if she feels safe, but given the restrictions that we just demonstrated, right? Like if police have interpreted some scenario to be violent and or dangerous, and they're ordering people to, you know, take measures to secure their safety.
If police tell you to leave, do you have to leave?
That's a good question. It depends on the scenario, right? If you're just there recording, there shouldn't be a reason that they tell you to leave. But a lot of times the police are gonna say, I asked him to leave, when in reality, they're saying, you gotta leave, right? So there, you know, what's a more helpful piece of information to know is that they're gonna tell you to leave regardless, if they want to, right? Sure.
Do you think it would be a good idea to make the people aware of that card that I gave them?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I could talk with the organization, to do that after the presentation. Was there another question? Yeah, go ahead.
If someone's going down, on the gas station or a Motel 6 or something, it's pretty safe to assume that you're on the sidewalk, that you're legally in state territory to start filming, does that make sense? Like the sidewalk in front of that building or that piece of property that you're okay to film.
If you're in an area that you're legally allowed to be in, you're safe to.
Right, so like if I'm in front of a motel and someone's going down on that property, as long as I'm on the sidewalk in front of it, I'm good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Given any outstanding circumstances. There's a, you know, the law says one thing and sometimes reality says another. So what to do with your video? So this could be a problem, right? All of a sudden you have video, and if you don't have a centralized location to house this video where someone can go find it if they need to, if you don't know the victim, if you don't know any of their friends or family, what do you do with this video, right? It basically just sits in your phone with nowhere to go. So it's important to try to connect with someone at the scene who knows the victim so that you can get them that video if they want it or need it. Also, don't offer people your phone. Like some people might ask you for your phone for that video. Police might ask you, news might ask you, anyone might ask you. Don't give it to people if you have other stuff on there that you don't want people to see. Okay? If no one else is around you that knows that victim, try to say your name maybe, so at least that person can find you later to try and recover that video that you just took. Okay? That's another suggestion that could work.
The ACLU of Arizona has an app that you can download video that you've taken and record incident reports.
Right. Yes, so the ACLU does have an app where you can take video through the application on your phone, and they have it in whatever database that they have it in, and they can do with it what they can do with it. I would recommend, I guess, exploring the app before you use an app like that, because there may be some things that you might be uncomfortable with using an app like that, or any other app that does the same thing. But generally, I would say the ACLU is a good organization, and that could be a good method of taking video like this. Also, consider uploading your video using your best judgment. Consider uploading your video to organizations like Poder. Oh, great. Here are the hashtags up here. So for ICE agents, you also have First Amendment right to film ICE agents. As any government official, you have the right to film. I don't practice in immigration, so I don't know specifically how ICE agents would treat that filming, but the general rules of asking ICE agents questions like what's your name, what's your badge number if they have their badge number, those questions would be helpful for getting on video as well, because some people have made allegations that ICE agents are impersonating officers that they shouldn't be, or giving false information and things like that. And these are the ways to keep officers like that honest.
Juan tenía una pregunta y
Lo que quería preguntar era, por ejemplo, si yo voy de pasajera con otra persona que va manejando y estoy grabando, pero el policía me dice, no, no puedes grabar, ¿qué puedo contestar?
If I'm in a car, I'm the passenger in a car, someone's driving, and I start filming the situation, and the police tells me, hey, you can't film, what can I tell them?
I'll talk with you after.
If you ask for an officer's badge number and name, do they legally have to give it to you, and or can they lie?
I don't know if they legally have to give it to you. I think by policy, they are encouraged to give it to you, or maybe even required to give it to you, because I've never had an officer not give me at least officer blank and their badge number. I've never had an officer do that. I've had officers give me the wrong first name in very vulgar ways, but I've never had an officer not give me that information. But I don't know if they're required to do it. That's a good question.
I have a very specific question, so it's a little long-winded, and, about what just happened a couple weeks ago with, Barbie. So, watching a lot of the news, there's a civil rights leader that, his name is plastered on every one of those videos, right? Like right next to it. And, I doubt he was there, like that's his actual video. So when recording this, and like if something like this comes up, and you're recording the police, somebody says, hey, I'll take it for that video, media outlet, whatever it is, or let me use this because I'm gonna make a case out of it, whatever it is. And I guess my question is, what ends up happening, if they say, that's not your video anymore? I already sold it to the media, or you lose any sort of credit because now it's out in the world, you know what I mean? Because we're talking about cases against the police and the real trafficking with the legality of it. What happens in those sort of situations, you know?
I'm not sure I understand your question, but it is important to take measures to maintain the integrity of your video, and potentially giving it to too many people who may be editing it or fixing it up in certain ways certainly puts that integrity into question. I'm not sure if that's what you're asking, but if you're asking about what rights someone has to the original video, I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, I guess it was kind of that, like what happens to somebody, now they take rights of that video, or is that even possible? It's like, no, it's still on my phone, signing the paperwork, whatever it is, like, you know, what is there situations where that has happened? Especially, like I said, especially if I'm opening up cases against the police department.
Sure.
And they throw that out, they're like, oh, you signed a contract or whatever it is, you know? And then I guess that was my question is, has that happened, or is that a possibility for your video that you've taken to be like, well, it's worth nothing now?
You're asking, are you exposing yourself to not having ownership rights over that video?
Ownership rights, yeah, or being used to prosecute, you know, in a case.
So if you have the video and you always maintain a copy of it, you can use it however you see fit. Barring any of the weird scenarios that you may be describing, I don't know, like if someone buys the exclusive rights to the video, I don't know how that works. But I'm more than willing to talk to you after to discuss that.
Just because I've actually had that happen, because me and him, we record police all the time. We have YouTube channels where we do that. There's been a couple times where I've caught video of something, and what I'll do is I'll upload it to my channel, so I have that uploaded date, and then if news media or something reaches out to me, I'll send them the link to that video, And a lot of the times, it depends on whether it's TV or like an online article. Online articles, a lot of the times, if you send them a link to your video, they'll embed it in their article, so whenever someone clicks on it, if it's like on YouTube, it'll have your name on it. Then, when it comes to TV, that's where it kind of gets iffy on what they can or can't do with it. But a lot of the times, a safe bet, just so you can keep that, I guess, information that's your video, is uploaded somewhere first that has a set that'll say like when it was uploaded. Because then if you have any issues, you have that upload date as evidence that, hey, this is my video, someone's trying to claim it for themselves or something like that.
That's a good question. We can talk about that after.
I don't know if you know, but again, well, my question is, if you're in a situation where you're asking the officer for the badge that you need to get the and they give it to you, are they required, or is it like, because my situation is when I ask them for that information, it's like, since you took my information, I need your information to receive driver's license.
I don't, just with those facts, I don't know what legal justification that officer would have. If it's just because they gave you their information, that doesn't seem accurate at all to me. Or
just a
justified.
situation where someone, I was recording someone getting in a fight. So someone else grabbed my phone and threw it on the floor. So when they grabbed it, the person scratched me, so the person saw when the cell phone fell, and I told the officer, like, I want to file a report for assault. And so I asked him, you might need my name. But he's like, well, I didn't see anything, like, I can't file a police report. Okay, then, well, I need your information so I can call your supervisor and try to get something out of that.
Yeah.
So then when I asked him for his information, he didn't write it.
Sorry, but it's kind of hard.
He tried to take his information, he's like, well, you took my information, I didn't endorse it. And he asked me.
Yeah, so sometimes, this goes back to, so there are a few things in that scenario, right? Like, if you're asking to, for them to write a report, or you're asking them to document stuff, then they're gonna need your information. But another scenario too is this language that officers sometimes use, right? Like, I need your information or something like that, right? So it's, sometimes you think you're required to give your information when really it's just the language they're using makes you think that, right? But in your scenario, it sounds different. It sounds like because of the things the way you're interacting with that officer, that's why they were asking you for your information. But we could talk about that a little bit more after. I think all right, so just take these freedoms into account, right? Just as officers can't threaten you when you voice your opinion to them on the streets, they shouldn't be prohibiting you from taking video and exercising your First Amendment rights that way, okay? So it's important for us to be engaging in this activity, especially in Phoenix, when unfortunately it's on us to hold police officers accountable. But also, as a general rule, please use your best judgment and keep your own personal safety in mind as well. Are there any other questions? All right.
So thank you, Jamar. Let's give Jamar a round of applause.
Sorry, Isabel, can you help? Isabel, sorry, do you have something?
So,
Wait, before that, are you going to closing? Okay, before that.
okay.
Okay. So just before that, something that's really important right now, people have been asking about as ICE is coming, right? Like the ICE is happening, La Mira, these raids might happen. Like filming is extremely important in those situations as well. There's still police, right? And you can, and we still have the right to. But I think, a lot of these situations we talked about were when we see something happening and we go film, but there's also the situations when you're at your house or at your car, right? When they're coming towards us. So just again, for ICE specifically, we're gonna have a Know Your Rights on ICE, but just a reminder, they cannot come into your house or into your car without a judge signed warrant, right? Right now, what we have heard is that, and not now, but just also in the past, ICE sometimes comes with Phoenix police or local police, and they're asking and they're looking for someone. And they say, we have a warrant. And it might be a warrant, but it's an ICE warrant, like it's an internal warrant. But it has to be signed by a judge. It says judge, and there's a signature for that to be what we keep saying, a judge signed warrant. So we have seen families, and there's been a few videos that came up recently where they tried going to someone's house and someone immediately started filming, right, from the inside of the house and said, we're not opening, you don't have a signed warrant, or that person doesn't live here, whatever the situation was, there's been different ones. And they couldn't go in, right? Because one thing we have to remember is if they had the power to go in, they would go in. They wouldn't be asking us, right? If they had the power to go into our house because they had the signed judge warrant, they wouldn't care if we gave them permission or not. They would go in, right? So that's why, like, in on knowing our rights as well, filming those situations and filming what they're telling you. There might be a legal, like, thing we can do later, but at the minimum, what it would do is help show other people what kind of excuses they're using at the doors.
Would you explain the difference between a regular warrant and a no-knock warrant?
Yeah, well, in ICE, they have something called DHS and ICE. What's the difference between a warrant and a
regular warrant and a no-knock warrant?
No-knock warrant?
Yeah.
No knock. Oh, okay. Oh, no knock warrant. Yeah. I don't know about all of them on all the kinds, but on the ICE ones, like the immigration ones, the different, like, they happen differently based on the legal case. But ICE warrants, where they don't have to knock, it's gonna be an own internal DHS, ICE, that's what it'll say. When they don't need to knock, right, when they can just go in, it'll be a judge signed. There'll be, and it differs, the difference is minuscule in the form itself. It's literally just a corner where there's a judge name and a judge signature. So we have some pictures and we'll do that in the Know Your Rights, how they look, but the difference is very small. But it literally just, it does have in a corner judge, what judge it was, and a signature. Versus when it's signed by, it says ICE or DHS agent, right? It has another type of, but judge, right? So even Spanish speakers, judge. We're gonna like look at that word so we know what that word looks like if we don't know the language. So when we don't see that on the form, you don't have a right to come in, right? So I know that has been a question that has come up as well. And then just to reiterate, like, when they come in or they stop you in driving and you don't feel comfortable, I think someone said it, like having the phone out, putting it out. I know that Beta has done this a lot and very well, strong, like has done. She just puts the audio and leaves it, right? So the audio is just filming. You might not catch what they're saying, but she's been able to catch when they start yelling, when their tone changes. She catches how she responds and how they respond and saying, wait, my lights aren't broken. I know they're not broken. And then she catches the officer saying whatever they say and raising their tone and doing all of that, right? So as we get comfortable, because it is scary, like if you're in a car or in the house, and if you don't feel like, oh, I can't put up the phone, right? At least doing the audio is extremely important. Right? Yeah, so I think those are the 2 things. Does anyone have a question on those? So just wanted to reiterate that.
So we have a couple of next steps. I understand and appreciate everybody taking the time this evening to come out, and I know that a lot of you want to get involved further and participate more in events like these and other ones that we have coming up. So, very important, July 2nd at 2:30, there's been a special convening of the City Council announced by the mayor. She's going to talk about everything that we want to be talking about right now, right? The Civilian Review Board, the Ad Hoc Committee, and the potential implementation of the recommendations that have been happening over the last 10 years. Now, it's important that we all show up at our fullest capacity, because on July 3rd, they go on vacation until the end of August, right? So everything that has happened will be washed out in the sandy beaches of their vacation spots. Wait. So it's important to put the pressure on the city council members, right? For a clear timeline in implementing the Civilian Review Board and the Ad Hoc Committee. We're doing this so they don't just brush it off, right? Because they are going to be gone for the rest of the summer. So if we put that pressure on them right now, before they leave, and then show up when they get back to remind them, they can't brush it off. And also, we just launched a petition to demand this specific timeline before they go on vacation. And I think, so the petition is, this is where you'll find it and access it. It's important that we all share it, sign it, and share it again, right? Do we have anything else that you want to talk about?
No, just to reiterate that, right? Like, who showed up last week to the Tuesday community meeting or the Wednesday council meeting?
Right.
Who went to those last week? A lot of us, right? So out of that, because so many people showed up, multiple days in a row, like, one of the demands that was able to be pushed is like, you need to implement review, oversight over this police department. And you need to implement all of the recommendations people have been making for years. And they didn't do anything that day legally to do that, but there was a commitment by the council that they were gonna do that. So the next step, we've been pressuring for that commitment, happens July 2nd, where they're having just a meeting about policing. So this will just be about policing, and this is where they're gonna talk and either actually move forward or not move forward with these next things. Right? So that's next Tuesday. So it's a special meeting. It wasn't on the books until this morning. They built that, they created that this morning.
For the petition, does it matter if you're a citizen, resident, non-resident?
No. The petition is an online, like, organizing internal tool to pressure to say, look how many people want this. So it won't ask you for citizenship or anything. It'll just be your name and I think it's your zip code. Yeah, bit.ly/PPD oversight.
You want it bigger?
I can't see that.
Sorry. My dainty handwriting.
When you say next Tuesday, do you mean this coming Tuesday or the next week?
July 2nd, right?
July 2nd, next Tuesday. Because as Paris mentioned, on July 3rd, they get to go on vacation till August 28th without doing anything about this if we don't force this moment. Any questions on that?
I don't have a question per se, but I do have a comment if you don't mind. My name is Arizona Auditor. I have a YouTube channel. I have about 10,000 subs. People love to watch the watchers, right? The people that watch us. So it's super important if you guys are gonna go out and record the cops, know your rights, learn your rights, study your rights. But the most important thing to remember is if you don't know what to see, what to do, or what to say, silence is golden. You have a Fifth Amendment right. It's the right to remain silent. If you don't say anything, you're not gonna say the wrong thing every time. So just remember that.
I'd like to add one thing. If you want to blow these people's mind, stop shouting. Don't be rude. Don't be disrespectful. If you really want to blow their mind, just be silent and listen. You can hear more when you're not hollering.
When filming, or you're saying overall?
Anytime.
Yeah, and with that, I'll add like a PSA to our white friends. Is that in some of these meetings, actually, we have had in our last one, some people who are either white passing, identified as white, who were yelling and saying things to everyone, right? Which, you know, to some point, like, everyone's like, okay. But at some point, I don't know, anyone who was at the council meeting, people of color kind of stepped back and got tense. Why? Because as we're pissing off those cops in those meetings, right? Our white friends are pissing off the cops in those meetings. When we go out in the streets, they're not gonna take it out probably in a white woman or white person, right? So other people are being put at risk in those moments. So I just wanna just make that also PSA to our allies and friends, right? Like, how we act and show up in those spaces, like, will impact how other people are gonna be treated or responded to, either there or outside of that space. And this is just more like, hey, let's be cautious that there's an impact to that. Because all of us, we were speaking our truths, and it was extremely powerful, and there were children who were speaking their truths, and all of that was extremely powerful. And then at some point, families and young people and people of color became worried about where this could go, right? Because of what other people that are not in the same way impacted were asking.
I'd like to say, by the way, my name is Walter Nichols. I was at the city council meeting and at the church, and I spoke with both of them, okay? I can cuss like you wouldn't believe.
Yeah, I do.
I don't have no problem doing that. But there's a thing called social etiquette. And we always got to take into account that there's children that will be there. See, so don't use profanity, be respectful, and say what you got to say, so people can hear you, everybody. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, and then, you know, like, folks, like, anger is, we should be angry at what's happening. Right? It's really, you know, families are in pain, people are in pain. If you're watching this, you're in pain. Like, all of, like, the emotions we're feeling, they're real and they're valid. And that's what we can't let up in this moment, right? So if you can show up, right, we can send you a reminder, text, a call. You can come and sign up here under this part of the board. And then the petition bit.ly/PPD oversight. It'll take you 30 seconds, I promise. And then once you sign it, you can just share it.
Will it be on your Instagram?
Yes.
Yes.
There's our
It'll be on all our social media. If you don't follow us on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, it's called End Action. And we'll have all the links on there.
And then I saw another.
I know you guys have your social media outlet and whatnot. I call it Instagram, but do you guys have the video of the meetings of the city council and of the police committee forum? Is that whole? video somewhere?
That whole video, yeah, on our Facebook, it is, we share the full, Tuesday meeting was hard because so many people were filming and slowed down folks, but we did share, ABC 15, who did have, yeah.
I have both of them too, both of them,
Oh, and-
fully.
Cool. So to close off, I'm gonna ask everyone to stand up.
Anuncias el evento del miércoles.
Okay. July 3rd, we're gonna do a Know Your Rights on immigration. Can I ask you to move maybe around? We're gonna do a circle. Oh, just, yeah. A Know Your Rights for immigration, July 3rd at 6 p.m. here. That's next Wednesday. We're also gonna be doing family packets, so like, how do we get ready in case, which is a reality for a lot of us, ICE comes, ICE stops us, or something with immigration happens, how do we get ready and prepare our families? So we're gonna be doing all of that on July 3rd, Wednesday here. Okay, so we're gonna close off just with the Unity Club, right? And this is a club that's been used throughout decades in organizing, specifically around the farm workers movement. And it's about having one unison movement, beat, rhythm. It is also supposed mirrors our heartbeat, and it goes faster and louder as more people participate, which talks about the unity of being together and the unity of organizing. And then we're gonna close down with the one clap together, and we're gonna say justice, right? So we'll clap, we'll go louder and louder, and then at one point I'll do this, and we're gonna just do one together, saying justice, right? Got it? Okay.
A really quick announcement, that Bitly is case sensitive, so it's gonna be lowercase
For a business
oversight.
card? No.
I can give you
And
my contact.
thank you, Jamal.
Yes, they come civil rights district.
Heather does from Oh, you do?
You didn't share it?
Okay, I gave it to Paris.
That's the lady right there?
Yeah. I'll give you my contact.
Okay, cool. All right, guys. So that was it, guys. That was it was a community meeting here in the city of Phoenix, where some of this is a non-profit organization. They passed out some flyers during the protest of people that were, if you're interested, if you're tired about being abused by the police, if you're tired of seeing police abuse people, come out and see, get educated on how to record the cops. And so we got one of these flyers when we were out there, and we couldn't stay away from here. So it was great. You guys, make sure you guys leave a comment. What do you guys think? I thought, for me personally, it was great. They gave great information, great feedback, and it wasn't overwhelming. I think that was my biggest concern, was that there was so much information. But no, it was actually pretty good, and there was a lot of actually Spanish speakers here. That they have a system here where you guys heard behind me was a translator, and she was speaking into a microphone, and so everybody that needed just a translator can just hear it on their head. But yeah, they did an amazing job. I'm gonna get the information. Some of you guys out there also might benefit from these guys, so we'll be able to discuss a little bit more. All right, guys. So let's see. So thank you, guys. I'm gonna go ahead and close this out. Thank you guys for joining us. It was a pleasure, and hopefully we'll go do some cop watching. Maybe we'll bring some more live stuff. You guys have a blessed rest of your night, and thank you guys for joining.